Now I know in our Women of the Bible series, we've been talking about a lot of strong women, but this week we're going to be talking about a woman who is just completely just wicked and evil and just, it's bad. Welcome to Bearded Ministry. My name is Josh Nichols and this is Monday Minute. Monday Minute is a place where we get your week started off with a quick Bible study. So if you're new here, check out some of the previous videos. But if you've been here before, you know what time it is, and it's time to get your week started off with some of that biblical truth. Come on! Let's get started. The woman that we will be discussing this week, her name is Jezebel, and Jezebel was the daughter of a priest of the false god Baal. And Jezebel's husband was a guy named Ahab, who was the king of Israel. Jezebel brought her worship to the false god Baal to Israel, which is in direct opposition of God forbidding idol worship. Jezebel had such a dominating personality that she was basically in charge of her husband, the king. We also see that Jezebel was responsible for killing God's prophets. But there was this one prophet of God who caused Jezebel a lot of trouble, and that prophet's name was Elijah. Now during this time there was a drought for 3 years. Well, God tells Elijah to go and meet with Ahab and say that he is going to send rain. Elijah obeys and he goes to Ahab and he tells him, you know what, you bring all 450 prophets of Baal and all 400 prophets of Asherah and meet me at Mount Carmel. They all do this, and then we see this passage from chapter 18 verses 22 through 24. Then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the God's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut them into pieces and put it on wood, but do not set it to fire. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood and not set fire to it. Then call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, then he is God. Okay, so Elijah puts this challenge out between all of these other prophets of Baal and these false gods, and then he said, I'm the only prophet left. The prophets of Baal, they go and prepare their sacrifice, and then call on Baal up until about noon. Well, guess what? Nothing happened. So Elijah says, hey, shout louder. They continued, and guess what? Nothing happened. Well, Elijah tells everyone to come around, and he digs this big trench and he prepares the sacrifice, and then he gets 4 large water jars and they pour them over the sacrifice 3 times. Elijah prays to God, and then God lights the sacrifice on fire, proving who the real God is. You go, God! Woo! Elijah then commands for all of the other false prophets of Baal to be actually killed. Now after this, poor little King Ahab, he goes home and he starts telling Jezebel what has happened, and she gets pretty angry about all this. We see in chapter 19 verse 2, so Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them. And after this, Elijah ends up going and fleeing into the wilderness just for a little bit. Later on in the story, King Ahab wants this vineyard of this guy named Naboth. Naboth refuses his offer, and King Ahab goes back home and he starts, pretty much having a big pity party and sulking around. Well, Jezebel basically calls out King Ahab, and she decides that she's going to take matters into her own hands. She writes a letter in Ahab's name, she seals it, and then she sends it to the elders of Naboth's city. And we can find the letter in chapter 21 verses 9, where it says, proclaim a day of fasting and seat Naboth in a prominent place among the people, but seat 2 scoundrels opposite of him and have them bring charges that he has cursed both God and the king. Then take him out and stone him to death. The elders do this and they end up stoning Naboth. Poor guy. When Jezebel finds out, she tells King Ahab, get up and take possession of that vineyard. Well, do you remember old Elijah? Well, don't forget about him, because God then uses him again to deliver this message. Say to him, this is what the Lord says, have you not murdered a man and seized his property? Then say to him, this is what the Lord says, in the place where the dogs licked up Naboth's blood, dogs will lick up your blood. Yes, yours. And also concerning Jezebel, the Lord says, dogs will devour Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. Later on in the story, we see that King Ahab's in this battle, and then he ends up getting injured and ends up later dying, and ends up fulfilling what God had said about how the dogs end up licking up his blood off the chariots. Josh, but what about Jezebel? Did she get away? Fair warning, this part is just a little bit gruesome. Well, later on we see in 2 Kings chapter 9, this guy named Jehu is actually named king of Israel. Jehu actually goes goes to Jezreel and he finds Jezebel and tells the eunuchs with her to throw her out of the window. These eunuchs pick her up and throw her out the window. Yes. And she is trampled by horses. Okay. And before they could go and bury her, these dogs had already come and devoured her, leaving only her skull, her hands, and her feet. Thus fulfilling the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah that we had actually read earlier. Now this is a very gruesome ending to this story, but it proves that wickedness and evil to God's people will be handled by God. Just like we see in Revelation, God has a plan and he will eliminate evil and fulfill his ultimate plan. Thank you for joining this episode of Monday Minute. Next week we're going to talk about the daughter of Jezebel. I mean, she couldn't be as bad as her mother, right? Well, be sure to come back and find out. But until then, I want to encourage you to get out there and be encouraging to someone. All right, peace.